Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Dr. Susan Fay, and I have today sitting next to me here Heather Drummond from Nova Scotia. Is that right? No,
New
no,
Brunswick,
New
Canada.
Brunswick. New Brunswick. See, I can't even get that right. It's really funny. We're going to talk a little bit about life as it comes up and spirituality and intuition and real life experiences of how we move through the world. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather for a moment to tell you who she is and what she does. And then, for those of you who don't know me, I'll go and talk a little bit about me and what I'm doing and why we're doing this together. So, all right, take it away, Heather.
Oh, thanks so much, Susan. And literally before we hit the record button, we were talking about how imperfect our day was and how it's almost refreshing to see people be imperfect, in some way, shape, or form. So I'm Heather Drummond. I am in Canada on the East Coast. So I'm an hour east of Maine. I'm in an Atlantic time zone. I'm in New Brunswick. And I have worked as a naturopath with people and dogs and cats for 17 years. Prior to that, I worked in the corporate world. Like I think a lot of people have a previous life or several of them in this lifetime, and that was one of mine. And probably, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, I got interested in horses in the therapeutic riding program here locally. And in the start of 2019, I dipped my toe in that pond a little bit further. And then in the September of 2019, I actually got the opportunity to volunteer at a local barn here with between 8 and 12 horses. And I'm like treading water with a big smile on my face in the pond of horses now. And that's what has brought me to meeting Susan, I guess, probably 2 years ago almost.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's been wonderful to hang out in the land of horses. It literally puts this grin on my face. So the world can be awful and I can go hang out with a horse and I'm like, oh, there it is. There's joy. So
Yeah,
thanks for having me today, Susan. This is awesome.
yeah. And Heather and I often have some pretty deep conversations about intuition and how we navigate the world in that space of, you know, accessing intuition and letting it guide us through our lives and give us information and also it's always good to have somebody that's your sounding board to say I'm experiencing this thing intuitively and I'm trying to decide if that's based on my own trauma or and am I evaluating this in the right way or do you have a different perspective on what you're feeling from it? And we're both working in that space of the intuition of learning how to evaluate for ourselves maybe. I don't know. I think that's where a lot of people have come to me and said I don't know if this is I don't trust my intuition, right? I don't trust it and they're needing some kind of feedback all the time and confirmation and I think what we get, and maybe Heather and I, it's like we work in that space, but every once in a while you come across that big block, that big event that puts you a little bit off balance and you start to mistrust what you're getting intuitively. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather. And are you feeling that kind of thing, or do you experience that also?
Oh, yeah. I think it comes down to, like you mentioned, I think trauma can be one of those triggers that puts us off our knowing compass. And it does happen because I think you can't be born without experiencing trauma, or else you'd be perfect like God made you. I think that that's part of what makes us human. And so as we work on our trauma, more and more trust to our intuition it seems like those two go together almost. I don't know why I'm saying that, but possibly there's correlation, or possibly that's coming down like this as opposed to coming from my brain. So it definitely shows up in my life, and that sounding board piece has been a huge part for me to have that validation or have that check and balance when it is my trauma, making stories about a particular thing. Um, because I think that's where, for me, things go on is trauma leads to stories. Stories, are those intuitive? Or are they not? Well, I'm not getting my goosebumps, but I get my intuition a whole bunch of different ways. So maybe it's still intuitive, and you can get on these little like zoom, and to have somebody else feel and sense that situation without even knowing the players sometimes is golden, because then you've got a almost like a brake put in or a stick put in your wheel that's making you go around and
Yeah.
around and around in the stories. So does that happen for you, or how does it show up for you?
Yeah, I begin to do the stories, and then I start to question the stories of whether I'm perceiving things correctly, or evaluating things, and that's where I love having you and different people that I call. It's like I'm experiencing this thing, and give them very little information, but it's like, what is your perspective on this? And there's this, with that said, there's this trap sometimes that we get into, I think, with intuition, where we don't trust any of it, and so we're always looking for validation. We're always trying to find that thing. And I don't want either of us to say, I don't think either of us do that, but it's these big events where where you need somebody to like sound off of and help you maybe get back in your body, or get back into um, looking at things in different ways, and really understanding where am I at, because we all get blown off balance. And Heather and I spoke about this a little bit before we even came on, and I've had this show up, and I think this is where intuition intersects with things that go on in your life, that you start to look for messages, and confirmation comes in messages that show up. And I told Heather, before I got here, I went out to feed the horses, and my gate had blown off in the pasture, and I'm like, I'm unhinged. It unhinged. And the day before, my two front doors blew open, like out of nowhere in the middle of the night. The wind blew and both of my doors wide open. And so I'm taking that as a sign that, yeah, I'm not completely, maybe I got myself way too open. I'm not completely balanced and in myself, and protecting my own energy. So in that case, I know, like, maybe some of the things that are coming intuitively may not be 100% right now.
Hmm. But I
So
I think we talked also just before we started, or maybe we hit record already, about the day we're recording this, and how like globally we're on a cusp of an anniversary of an event in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, where globally there's an awareness of trauma as an anniversary. So my morning, I shared with Susan, was filled with like time things that were just like, okay, that I interpreted that as an hour earlier. I'm an hour late for that. Great. Or can we shift that appointment somewhere else? Like, it's just been like I've been on sand that's sliding, or I'm not sinking in it, but it's like the floor is sliding. But it's time. It's not me being grounded. It's actually time that's sliding. So
yeah.
it's a curious, and that can happen too, I find, is we can have the exact same thing go on, but use different words for it, and those different words kind of are like little breadcrumbs. And so it's like, okay, well, what is this? Is it even bad, or is it just that we're needing to let go of stuff, and so we feel unhinged because we're used to that comfort place of having the stuff we were about to let go of? Like, it's curious, because having experienced kind of the same but different situations in the same timeline, it's kind of like, oh, okay, you're having that kind of day too. Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
And, I think for people in general, we all feel this energy. We all feel energy and we all experience things, but we interpret them different. We interpret that energy differently based on what experiences we had or how open we are to actually understanding the energy field. But even if we're not open to it, we still get affected by it. And I think this is what we're seeing globally, and even what we were talking about with, there's an anniversary coming up that was a very high energy experience in the world with Pearl Harbor being bombed, and that put an imprint on the energetic field. And you can think about how many people were affected and how much emotion got released and experienced during that time, how much fear, how much anxiety, how much all of these different emotions started to come together. And it's very hard for that energetic imprint not to be held in the mass consciousness and replayed.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know about you, Heather, but I know that there's events that were, my own personal events in my life that had a very high emotional impact. And when the anniversary of that date comes, a few days before, I'm starting to feel off, and I'm starting to question, well, why am I off? It's that imprint coming back up. It's that energetic reminder. This is an anniversary of a highly energetic thing. And what's really interesting, and I didn't realize it till this moment that I said that, was that I'm off because energetically, this is an anniversary for me of when my husband left. And
Oh,
it was very, very traumatic.
okay.
So I didn't mean to overshare there, but
No, no. That's
wow, I just saw
wow.
the
I'm
whole thing
goosebumpy.
come together. Um, and these are the
Interesting.
things that I think, talking with somebody else and bumping it off, I didn't realize that that's part of my being unhinged right now.
Well, and there's a thing that goes with that, from the Bach flower remedy world. When I went through training with that, you can go back anniversaries of threes. So 3 days, 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, 18 years, 18 years, 6 months, like whatever can be divided by three. And you will possibly, not necessarily, but you will possibly have started to experience the effects of that stress that happened that many years ago. So it could be that you start with arthritis or, some symptomology arrives. But it can also be energetically that reverberation is stronger on those threes. It's a curious thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was full of goosebumps as soon as you said that. So I'm like, oh, that's part of that
Yeah.
thing. Because it and when you described how we get affected by events, my visual was like a body check against a board from a hockey perspective, where you're skating along fine and then it's just like, oh, way over there, and like you're no longer the same. Like the beanbag shape is no longer the same when it hits a wall. So it's to reformat that shape that's healthy again for you or anyone after situations like that. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Wow.
Wow. And
It's real. That's real. Like,
it's real, and it can, I just kind of like to talk about these energetic imprints, and it's like we had a big event with a lot of horse people, Warwick Schiller put on in Texas, and that was an over the top energetic experience. And it's interesting how people responded to it in different ways. Um, it was for a lot of people super, super positive, and it was based on a whole coming together of people that were thinking the same and wanted to collaborate and expose the horse world to a new way of thinking. And there was so many good things, but because of the level of intensity of the energy, that also caused people's nervous systems to go on overload a little bit.
Mm.
And their response to overload was interesting to me because it could be one of you got euphoric. Um, Another possibility is that you went the other direction and got depressed. And all of this is a consequence of that intensity of the energy and how your nervous system responds and what levels of trauma you've had in your past. And all of those were going to dictate how you experience that particular event and whether it was good or bad. But what I found is people started to compare themselves. If they didn't have the over the top euphoria feeling and positivity and all that coming off of it, that they felt that there was something wrong with them. Why didn't I experience the same thing these people did? And really, there's nothing wrong with you. And sometimes euphoria is mania, and that's not necessarily a good thing either. So don't, I just want to go away with, don't label yourself as this. I didn't experience the things that everybody else did, or I didn't feel the same things, and so therefore I must not be open or I must not be good. This is all, it's all okay. It's all a learning experience. And to go back and evaluate yourself and how you responded, and do you respond in that way in other situations. So I'm going to turn it over to you to like kind of explain more of me mumbling through that little bit of stuff, because we're doing this unscripted, and so it's like, okay, I'm not that good at explaining things as they come in, but I'll let Heather kind of
I don't know
give
about
her
that.
perspective.
I
Yeah.
think you're good. I think you're good. What hit me when you were talking is that human nature urge to compare and have a negative, um I don't know why human nature is that way. When we compare, we're never comparing ourselves and go, oh yeah, well my response is the minority, so it must be better. We that math just doesn't seem to operate in the human psyche very often. So um I think the hitch is, to compound what you're saying, is that initial need to compare our experiences to the same event, and mark something as better or worse than the other. So that's one thing that hit me when you were talking. The other thing that hit me is um, how, like, intensity is sometimes hard to um, balance yourself in. So some people will experience an intensity of energy and actually get physically sick, and it will create, a detox kind of situation where they're experiencing chills, or they're having the runs, or they're getting anxiety. Like they'll physically get a response, and that's not everybody that has physical symptoms, but some people definitely experience energy physically. Other people experience it more with moods. So their moods actually will shift, and they will become more cranky or abrupt, or more caught up, like you say, in that mania situation, where they're more caught up in the, like, oh yeah, 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 and they're just, it's almost like the tsunami is of a wave of something is carrying them, and they're not able to ground themselves and know what's theirs and what's everybody else's. And I think that's a practice to know what's yours and what's everybody else's, because
Right.
it's something, I don't know where it comes from, but I think it's something possibly in the codependent world of like fixing the energy around you if it's not right, and then you're taking on the energy of the other situation, and then you're in this stew of I don't know what's mine and what's everybody else's. So
Yeah.
um i think I think sometimes when there's that much collaboration and that much intention all going the same way. It could have been a Tony Robbins conference. It could have been any number of things where energy is building, 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 building. If a person isn't aware that they're going into that type of environment to start with, and if they're not aware of how that environment can affect them, then they're kind of like that hockey player that's about to get slammed into the wall, and it may feel good because it's going to shake maybe a joint that's out of place back into place, you know, or it may feel horrible because like now you're all bruised. But the intention behind the original gathering is usually never to create that environment that puts people off. It's just it's almost like a side effect that isn't actually talked about, or even um, isn't in the awareness sometimes when people gather in those ways. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah. And, I always equate things like, why did I go experience things? Why did I have this effect? Because there was times where during the event, I could feel my body trying to regulate the energy. And one of the ways that I do that is I dissociate. I wasn't able to use my other tactic, which is to leave the situation and go regroup myself and like get my energy back and ground myself again. It didn't allow for that. So um, this dissociative place that I go, I was fighting because I wanted to stay there, but my nervous system was being overwhelmed a little bit, and I thought about that. Why was I experiencing that, and why did I come to that event? And um, knowing that I'm a super introvert and that I if I get tired, I don't my defenses aren't always the best, and I can't regulate my energy in that intensity of the number of people and the amount of it was over the top for me. Um, and I thought about, why am I experiencing this, and what am I supposed to learn from this situation? And one of them I kept going back to, we both work with horses. This is what horses experience with humans. They can't get away from the intensity of our energy. And so they have to get a coping skill, a coping mechanism. And that can be, first of all, they can do the same thing. We talk about checking out. They can check out. If they can't check out and they're forced to be in it, we talked a little, you mentioned about anger, frustration, emotions coming up, make it stop. Um, so I think what I was doing is like, I was almost the horse in that situation going, oh my God, what do I do with this? How do I act appropriately when I've been completely overwhelmed, flooded? And knowing that underneath it, I am a kind person and I want to do the right thing and I want to act appropriately in public, and going, I don't know how to do this in this situation, as my nervous system is overwhelmed and I'm flooded and I'm like on energy overload, um and I just had the empathy for the horse in that situation. And really, as people get on the energy bandwagon and they are excited about seeing how energy works with horses and all that, that they tend to overdo a little bit. And then that creates those situations where the horse can have these experiences like I had, of wanting to check out, wanting to,
Mm,
lash out or make it stop, and they don't have any way to verbalize that to us.
mm,
So it's interesting. And I'm going to turn it over to you in a second, but when I did my talk, I ended up with, I was looking at the clock and I was still in like a minute and a half to go. Like I had a minute and a half more of my 20-minute allotment. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what I should talk about. And it just was a flash that I should mention Dr. Doolittle. And I'm thinking, probably people didn't see me like the deer in the headlight look for a little bit while I'm like, my brain's going, I'm talking in front of all these people, but I'm getting this intuitive hit that I'm supposed to mention Dr. Doolittle. And I'm thinking, how does that apply? What is this? How does this tie into what I've been talking about? But it really was about I believe the Hugh Lofton, who wrote the book, actually worked in this realm, and he understood how energy works and how we can overwhelm our horses, our animals, with our energy. And so he named his character, who has had this great relationship and could talk to all the animals. That guy he named Dr. Doolittle. Doolittle. And it was just hitting me at that moment. Yes, we think as humans we got to do more and we got to have these big events and rile up the energy and get it all, but no, go in slowly, gently. Let people, let animals, let everything acclimate their body to that energy.
mm,
So
mm.
that's my 2 cents. So I'll turn it over to you to interpret what I just said.
No, well, it's funny because we talked a little bit before that event, and what my intuition was that you and a couple other people who were attending, who in I don't know this clinically, but in my estimation were more introverts, were going to represent the horses. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. Like I had no idea what that meant. But I have goosebumps as I say it now. And it's really interesting how um, I know I do, I shouldn't say we, I can get very enthused about things, like very enthused. And some people have referred to my energy as like puppy dog energy because I'm like, whoa, yay, like yay. Um, but for whatever reason, um, when I'm around horses, my instinct is to like tone it down a whole bunch of notches because I want to stay safe. So if I'm puppy dog energy, that's not going to work for me to stay safe. That's how my lack of horse experience is regulating my um, abilities to be puppy dog energy and be that higher enthusiasm on the scale. And I think sometimes um, we or I, if I didn't have that in the back of my head, like, you don't want to be kicked, you don't want to scare that horse, you don't want to, like, if I didn't have that in the back of my head, I would have gotten myself into pickles and it wouldn't take long before a horse would teach me and I would get hurt. So I think if we listen to all the different ways that intuition can show up and realize that it doesn't have to be um you know the typical intuition. I mean, I arrived one day at the barn and I'd come fresh off an appointment and I was wanting to get riding and I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be so great, it's a perfect day, blah, 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 blah. And there was a little bit of that freneticness, and one horse just started bucking and kicking, and he's the youngest one and everybody else is placid, and I'm like, oh, I'm not ready to go get a horse. I'm not going to get on their back. Got the lead rope, kept on walking, walked to the furthest pasture, like laid on the ground, and I'd sit up and he'd kick again. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like release all this energy on the ground here because this is not gonna be what I'm taking to a horse and get on his back. Probably tested it 3 times because I was like, oh, maybe it's now. And then when he looked at me and he just went back down eating grass, I'm like, okay, I'm discharged. I'm in a place where I'm more present. I'm able to do this with respect to the horse, softly. Like, so for some reason, I had to bring all that up again. I don't know why I tell stories sometimes,
No,
but
that's all
it,
good.
it's
Um,
funny how our environment sometimes is the thing that will attune us to what is healthier,
mhm,
um, if
yeah.
we listen. If we listen.
Um, and that brings me to, what you're saying is like we can charge the environment with our energy. We can plug in, and it's really interesting because this kind of brought me back to something I did with my sister, and she's going through some things where the environment where when that she's in is being highly affected by somebody that's putting a lot of charge on everything, and it's a very negative charge of energy that's coming in. And what she's experiencing, she's got a lot of dogs and they're all acting out
Mm,
in different ways. Each one of them acts out in a different way, but they're all responding to the same energy.
mm,
And I sat with her on the phone and we talked, and as we were talking, one of the big German Shepherd dogs had come over to the border collie and was like on top of him, like with his mouth on his neck and like ready, really aggressively going after this other dog. And she got to this point where I've got to control this situation. I've got to do something physically to control this. And that's our first impulse is the energy is out of control. Let's go in and control it physically. But I had her step back. It's like, no, that's their relationship problem. That's between the two of them. And what you can do is change the charge on this environment here. So let's sit for a minute and we're going to change the energy, your energy. You're only responsible for yours. And the strongest wave in the field will cause the other waves to entrain.
mhm,
So I walked her through the process of grounding and breathing and finding an energy that was going to be an energy frequency that would be calmer. And what's so interesting is once you take away that need to control the energy and instead say, let me control myself. It was no more than 3 minutes. And I'm going to post this on my Facebook group. Um, the dogs were asleep. They had
mm.
separated, they had all laid down, they were calm. And she's freaking out like, how could this happen within, a couple minutes? Because you changed the frequency of energy in the environment. And and so maybe this is kind of the thing to take away from this
Yeah.
talk that we're doing is that instead of thinking, go control it, go do it, do little. We did very little, but we got it down. And so
You did it
maybe,
consciously. You did little
right,
consciously.
very little in a conscious awareness of what we were experiencing from the environment. An evaluation of it wasn't that we can control each individual dog's behavior, but we can control our own energy, our own response to that energy that's going on. Because her thing was, I asked her, what, like, are you feeling it in your body? She goes, oh, yes, I am. I'm like, yeah, they've drawn you into the energy field that they've created there, or they're responding to more precisely. And your job is to identify that you just experienced that and say, not going there. You decide where you want to be. And as soon as she did that, the energy could shift. And taking that burden of, I've got to fix something outside of myself. I've got to fix somebody else. I've got to fix this situation. I've got to fix these dogs. I've got to. No, just do little.
Mhm.
I love that. It's like I
Yeah,
just have to go to the guy that wrote this book and go, you were so brilliant. And you
profound.
tried to tell people how this works. Way back in, I don't know, 1900s, early 1940s. I think it was in the 40s he wrote that. But could he come out into the human world and say, hey guys, do little? No, he had to write it in a children's book.
Yeah,
He had to present the concept through a children's book where it would be accepted at some level, like maybe a few people would get that.
yeah.
So,
Isn't that the truth? Like you, the old saying, I'm throwing spaghetti on the wall and whatever's going to stick sticks. It's like anything that anybody says, there's going to be a percentage of people that will receive one message, will receive other percentage will receive another message from it, and another percentage will receive another message. And so even out of this space that we're talking today, I'm sure people will take different people will take different things from it. And hopefully the concept of do little is going to be one of them, because I think that's so true. I think
yeah.
I think we get it, again, it comes back to that trauma need to fix, being triggered, and that creates the story, and that adds to the energy, and that creates the need to fix again. And it's having that outside person, but you can start to train yourself to not need that outside person, to recognize, okay, I need to unplug, I need to disengage, I need to remember do little, and be
Yeah,
more.
just
Like,
be.
yeah. Mm. Mm.
And
Neat.
I think this just gets to that, the beginning of our conversation when I was saying, just I'm not going to, I want to have my intuition and have a little feedback on it and confirmation, but not become dependent on somebody else to always confirm it for me. And and really, I think for both of us, what we're trying to do is go out there and maybe give people some tools so that they can start to apply these in their lives without the need for us.
Mm.
And that's a different model that for the business world, for what we're taught, is like you have to make people, what I was kind of from the business world part is like find something and make people need you, and they'll always be coming back, and I could never stomach that idea because I'm like, well, why would I want them keeping coming back and needing me? I want to give them information, and then my joy comes from them applying it maybe in ways that I never even thought they could was possible, and they apply these different tools and they get their results. That to me is life confirmed. Like that's my purpose, and I'm not meant to be the guru. I don't want to be that. I want people to find their way, but I mean, we can guide them a little bit along the way, but definitely, their codependence is so high in our society and it infiltrates every aspect of our lives. And especially if you've been one, um, you try, after I went to school and learned about all these things, and it's like, wow, that's not a really functional way to live. And that's not really healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, any of those things. And when I see codependent situations showing up, I tend to want to exit from it and say, no, no, you got this. Please don't be dependent on me for your answer. Don't worry. Go do what you think you feel is right and see what happens and come back. We'll discuss it. But yeah,
It's the anti-business model. I
I
understand.
know, and
Like empower people, like just give them information, empower them, and then make room for new people. Like I think
right.
kind of we're both on that same page. I've had
Yeah.
more people tell me like your model sucks. I'm like, it's the model. It's just gonna be the model. Sorry.
I'm applauding you because at least you have a model that can suck. I don't even have a model. So, my about there are like, what's your model? Why aren't you doing that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't, it's just different. And maybe that's a consequence of what my age is now. And if I would have been doing this when I was in my 30s or 40s, I would have had a completely different, I probably would have had a business model. I probably would have had fallen into an idea of like, I've got to create this dependent group of people on me. And, that would have fed some need or my codependence thing. Who knows? But coming through the other end, and that's that's not what it's about.
No. Well, and
And
I think your model is to go where people resonate with you, whether that's in a clinic or whether that's one-on-one or whether that's online. It's to
yeah,
just be who you are and have people attracted to you, like the moth and the light, who are ready for what you have
yeah,
uh, as a possibility to create that communion with forces in a deeper level,
yeah,
and in that way, and people don't say word of mouth is a is a model, but it's my only model.
well, I kind of am the same way, but it feels like it's a conscious
Yeah.
decision. I don't know about you. Did you make that kind of, yeah. And it feels better because it weeds out those people that come because they're expecting something from you and then you let them down. If they hear word of mouth from somebody that had an experience and that person shared their experience and they said, who did you have this experience with? And then they pass on that information, and then you don't have to go through the whole thing of like screening that person and are they going to buy into this? Do they The business model as it is so much pressure to keep proving to everybody you have what they need.
Mm, yeah.
I'm too tired to do that.
Where did you come from? Who told you about me?
Yeah,
And
I
then
know.
I
I'm
know,
always surprised.
and then I know, like, okay, you know what to expect, maybe.
Yeah.
And some people come for one, and people come for more, and everybody's just on their own path, and that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. So
So,
yeah, we're friends for many reasons. We just keep discovering the likenesses sometimes. Yeah.
right, right. And I think that's what um that energetic match is, when people's energy frequencies and all of the thought, when I talk in the book, your thoughts and emotions create the energy signature that you put out to the world, and people will either like it or they won't. If they're in alignment with that, they'll be attracted to you. If there's something about your energy that is maybe opens up or makes them feel a little uncomfortable, they're not going to want to be with you. And there's no business model that I know of that can predict that sort of match, energetic match.
No.
That's why I'm going to leave it up to the energy field, universal consciousness to like find those people that are an energetic match. Um,
Yeah. Sounds like the best plan.
it's the only one I have. So, and I think there sometimes we get caught up in paradigms too about this is how business works and this is how we do things and this is how you get clients, or this is how you make money and how you live, and we buy into that. I've even bought into it because I keep going, well, if I bought into the business model as it exists, I would be able to retire. I could, I would have everything I need. That's part of the business model is like you'll get everything you need and you'll get these things. You just have to work harder. See, there's where work harder comes in again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you fail at that, and I failed at the business model so many times as it exists, you start to think you're a failure. But you're only fail at that model.
Mhm.
I'm doing okay. I think you're doing okay too with your model. I mean, and how I'm evaluating failure now is can I live feeling the way I want to live?
Yeah.
And it's not tied to what my bank account says it should, how I should feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's many things that are success.
yeah.
You know, freedom for me is one of them. It's like,
Oh,
what do
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
well, I feel like the energy, I don't know if you felt it, it just kind of came down like the resolution.
Yes.
This is all we have to say.
Yeah.
I saw it in you just now. I hope people, when they watch this back, you may see a slight change in Heather's essence, a little bit reflected in your body language, that you felt that energetic shift too, that
Yeah.
just happened. Like, okay, you guys have talked long enough. This
Yeah.
is good.
Like, okay, cool. Nothing else coming.
Cool. And, this is just for both of us an experiment. And I don't know how to navigate the business world and the Zoom world and the, what do you call it? YouTube, what do you call it? YouTube, all of that. But I just want to have real conversations where we're not selling something, we're not selling ourselves, we're not selling a concept, we're just explaining our experience with what we do.
Yeah.
And
There's some channeling thrown in there. Or some, I don't know why I said that, but this is for somebody.
yeah,
Some of that. Yeah.
so anyway, do you have any end remarks that you'd like to?
This has been fun. Like, I enjoy always just kind of not having an agenda and seeing what comes out. And then in hindsight, it's like, did I just say that? Did that come out? Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's all about. Or sometimes I don't even look backwards, but it's always fun to talk with you, Susan. It's great. Thanks for
Good.
inviting me.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to kind of reiterate to it. I probably won't edit this in any way because I want people to see real
Mm,
and see me fumble for words, see me think, see us be real in this space
mm,
and not overproduced and not over edited. And so we only look good all the time. And that's just my kind of my feeling on this. I don't know. You have to decide too, because you're the other piece of this. So
who I am.
and
It's where I act. I mean, I don't know.
not
The light
being
is
lazy or
always
anything, but there's just so much in our society that's been about how do you look, how do you come across, how do you do this, instead of what are you saying and what are you meaning and what are you bringing to the conversation, and without having to worry about what you look like or how you spoke or anything like that. It's your intent that came through, hopefully. So thank you, Heather, and perhaps we will do this again. And
yeah.
I appreciate your time today and just having a conversation. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been great. Very cool.
All
Until
right.
next time.
Cool. All right.